Morning everybody, I just finished playing Woodcraft, so let's talk about what I think about the game. In Woodcraft, players take turns choosing one of 7 actions which become more valuable the longer they remain unchosen. The actions, in combination with other workshop abilities, can be used to acquire and manipulate dice, which represent wood that can be cut, glued, purchased, or even grown. Specific combinations of dice and tokens are used to complete orders, which will eventually lead to the points that determine the winner at the end of the game. So let's take a look at some of the components as you open up the box. Like I said, everything in here is really loose in here and just kind of rolls around, so you can just take all these bags out. And the instruction booklet, and there's like a little reference sheet for some of the cards, just in case you don't know what they do. Then you've got the spinning wheel mechanism, which I thought was really cool, really solid idea. Now, if you notice, I had to put 2 of the pop-out pieces in there because that was the only way to make it flat, so when you put this piece back in, it's solid and it's not wobbling or warping. So I had to keep those. You don't have to do that, but that's what I did. The other option was to just take those smaller pieces out and to put them on top of the other piece, but then you get the same effect with the bump on the moving piece in the center. So yeah, so that's kind of that. It's got 4 player boards, and then individual baggies, which I took all the components that each player would need and put them in their own bags. So when you put everything back, it should fit in perfectly. I put those 2 pieces in. I kept those side pieces because that makes it so that it's nice and flat to bring all the pieces back in, put the instruction booklets, and then after that it's just placing in the individual bags. You've got some cards, which have 2 bags of cards. You've got some individual player bags, which are filled with the pieces that like each player is going to need. I highly recommend doing this and setting aside 4 bags for that. So you got all the different 4 player for each of the 4 players. Over here we have the dice bag, which I love these dice, by the way, just love the colors on them. And then you got all of the extra pieces, the blueberries and lanterns. You've got the saw pieces and the glue. And then of course you've got the bag of tools and then the little bits for the board. And that's it for the components. Alright guys, so now that we're back up top, I want to talk about what I think about the game. I wanted to have a little bit more structure to the way that I review my games, and so I took a few criteria. There are going to be about 5 things that we're going to look at in order for us to consider what this game is, and I'm going to give 2 points for each, maximum of 2 points for each category, for a total score of 10 of what I think the game is out of 10. And so for the first 2 points, I want to talk about setup and storage. So as far as starting off the game and setting it up, this game has a lot to set up. There's a ton of stuff. There's a very specific amount of things that everybody gets, which you can kind of put in their own little baggies. But remembering where everything goes I think after a few playthroughs of it, you'll get used to it. But man, it's a ton to set up. If you're just looking at this table, the table presence it has, it commands a lot of table. And so yeah, so I think that setting up can be okay. It's not too bad. It's not the worst game I've ever had to set up, but setting this up over and over and over again can be kind of difficult. This is one of those games that you're going to want to set up before people come over to play, so that way it's already ready to go, because setting this up while people are here is just a no-go. As far as storage goes, the game, when it came in the box, everything was kind of juggling and bouncing around inside of the box. So that was actually kind of a negative that I had towards it. I was like, man, everything sounds like it's just flying around on the inside of the box. But everything was secure and didn't have any damaged issues, so no problems there. Everything fits in the box. It's not like Paladins of the West Kingdom where it's like you're trying to like squish everything down. I have the same problem with Mosaic. I have the deluxe edition of Mosaic, the Colossal edition rather, and it's just like I can't even push the thing down because there's just so much stuff piled up inside of it. In this game, everything fits in the box relatively well. There's some finicky issues with kind of seesawing with this little wheel that creates an extra little level for things to warp, so you just want to be careful when you put everything back inside the box. But everything fits in. So as far as storage and setup goes, it is a little bit of a setup, but it's really not that bad, so I'm going to give this 1.5 out of 2 points. I'll give it 1.5 points, which I think Nothing really too bad, just a little bit of a setup, and it could be kind of hard to remember when you're setting things up. So that's setup. Now, let's talk about another aspect, which is learning the game and teaching the game. As far as learning the game goes, I think that it's an easy game to learn. It just takes a little while. This rule book is about, let me see. Rule book is about 20 pages or so of rules. And I think the last page is just like some solo stuff. So if you're not planning on playing it solo, which I recommend doing because it's a really good solo game, it could be a little bit to learn. And there's just a lot of rules. I found myself constantly like coming back to the rule book, and that, I mean, every game is like that, so I'm not going to knock it too hard for that, because it's just kind of like there's just so much, and there's so many rules that even if you did a player aid, it wouldn't even help, because it's just like you've got to remember. Now, some people are complaining about a lack of player aids, but I'll talk about that in a little bit, because it kind of has one on the board, but we'll talk about that in a second. But it does take a little while to learn. Teaching the game is far easier, though, because at the end of the day, there's only 7 actions you can really choose from. You choose an action, you do whatever it is, get the requirements. I think as you learn the game and as you teach the game, it becomes better as you play. That's the one thing. At first, I just felt a little bit overwhelmed playing it, but then as I started to play it more, I started to go, oh, okay, it's not that bad, right? Like this goes in here, and then every turn this goes up, and it's really not that bad. So as far as the learn and the teach goes, it's a lot easier to teach than it is to learn, but it's not the worst game I've ever learned. I mean, I've tried learning Feast for Odin, and that's a thick book as well, and just learning what all the actions do, and that one's not as intimidating, because it's like all the actions are the same, they just get stronger. But as far as the learn and the teach goes, 1.5. Can't give it a perfect score because it is kind of difficult to learn, and I found myself going back to the rule book constantly to remember rules. And then there are times where even in the rule book, I found like there were things that weren't mentioned in the rule book, but they was because they were located in weird places, and it's like, dang, I didn't even like, for this was really confusing. These little contracts you get at the very beginning, the public contracts, understanding how those worked was super confusing. And when you teach it to people, you start off with 4 contracts, but those contracts can only be played on these income phases. And so it's like you have these, Tom Vassell was talking about on the Dice Tower, and he's completely right about it. It's like people will always be like, wait, so when can I play the cards in my hand? It's like, we got to play them on the income phases. There are 4 income phases, 4 cards in your hand, you play 1 each income phase. And then, but once you get the hang of it, it's really not that bad. So yeah, 1.5 for the learn and the teach. Let's go to visuals and components. Artwork for the game is fine. It's great. I don't think there's anything wrong with the artwork. It is well decorated. I love the aesthetic of the game because the aesthetic is the brown, green, and yellow dice. Like, just looks incredible. I love the aesthetic of this game. It has like little lanterns and blueberry tokens, and you have your own little shop, and the shop is like a building which has little floors inside of it. It's got saws on the bottom. It's really cool, man. And it's got this roof attic area where you can put tools in, and you have your own little lumber yard with trees, and then you can take these little trees and put them on your board. Overall, visually, this game looks really good. And the only minor nitpick that I have with the visuals and the components is this part to me seemed a little bit lazy. And it was not lazy. That's so mean. I take that back. That's because these people worked really hard on this game, and I think they did a really good job. But it was the tokens for like the wood, the saws, and the glue. They're like little discs. Like the glue is cool because it's like translucent yellow. It's like, you know, glue. And then the saws are like little silver circles. And then the wood are like little tiny wooden cubes, which are fine. It would have been cool if they were like little saw tokens and like actual like resin. It is actual resin. I think the glue is, I guess, good for glue, but like it would have been cool to have better things. And then for the little wood planks, you know what I mean? I think that would have been kind of cool, even if they were like little cardboard pieces. But I think these work out pretty well. But I'm not gonna knock it. I think everything was really well produced and everything looks great. So that's a 1.5 for visuals and components. Can't give it a perfect score because I just think that there were some I think the components could have been Some of the components could have been a little bit better, but everything looks great. Visuals look great. Artwork looks good. I think everything is fine. Let's talk about gameplay mechanics. So, like I said, at first this game was a little bit overwhelming, but I guess as you play the game, about 3/4 of the way through, everything just kind of clicked for me, and I was like, oh, I get it. So if I take this, this goes this way, and the way the little mechanic over here works is pretty interesting. Has a lot of really cool mechanics in the game. I want to talk about some of those that I have. I like the player boards. I felt like everything on the player board had its place. It was well organized. Some people in their reviews are talking about the lack of a player aid, which I kind of got, but I mean, there's so many rules in the game. It's like, how can a player aid really help? It's going to be like this gigantic. As a matter of fact, I think the one on-board game, Keek, is pretty big. It's like 2 pages full of stuff, and so everybody's going to have this page that they're flipping over. But I mean, that's better than having the rule book in case you have a rules question. But you don't really need, as far as knowing what you have to do on your turn, it's printed on there. I don't know if people realize that because the game doesn't specifically really show it. Only once, like at the beginning, it shows you that. But there's a little image here that tells you, hey, your trees, grow each of your trees, your saplings, by 2 pips each. Then you can take an action. You can use a lantern to take a different action. You can spend 3 lanterns to get an extra action. And then you can do all of your free actions. Now, having a player aid for what the free actions are might be good, because remembering which ones are free actions is very important, because if you accidentally take one of these as a free action, you're like, oh, well, I'm going to plant a tree as a free action. Somebody was asking that on BGG, and it's like, no, you planting a tree is one of your main actions. It's not a free action. Free actions have a specific list, so maybe having something for that would be good. There's also this the helpers. They're these little elf-looking creatures that when you play them into your tableau, you will get instant effects, and sometimes you'll get long-term continuous effects. But really what these guys do is they're producers. And so what they will do is they will produce products that are at the top of their elf card. So for example, this elf that I have over here, she costs 5 blueberries. Blueberries are currency in this game. She produces a piece of lumber that's a 2, and then she provides also a saw piece, which are these little chrome pieces here. And so every time you use that production action, she will produce those. And I'm not going to go through all the actions and what they all do. I think that when you play the game, you'll be able to look through that stuff yourself. But there are 7 different actions that you can do, and some of those things are like planting trees, buying lumber from the lumber yard, or getting these little materials here, or improving your workshop. So like I said, I won't go through all of those things, but that's just kind of an overview of those. I like the helpers. They're really cool. And then there's certain times where if you place one on your board, it'll let you produce with 4 of your helpers. And so by doing that, you produce all the stuff that they do. And some of those turns you can produce a ton of stuff. Also, the production, when you place these helpers onto your board, it increases your production values for blueberries and for victory points. And so every time you move this up, at the end of every income phase, you're going to gain 3 blueberries and 3 points on the board. This board is what keeps track of your score, so you just keep this thing going down. I thought that was really, really cool. Now, this game is contract fulfillment, so like you're going to be getting these little contract cards that on the bottom of the card, it's going to show you what you have to pay in order to build that object. So I've got a tennis racket. I need a yellow 5 and 2 green 1s. Now the important thing is that you cannot overpay, right? So I couldn't say, well, I don't have a 5, I can just use a 6. You have to use a 5, and so there's certain ways that you can get a 5. For example, if you took the planting action where you can plant some lumber in your pots, you could take that yellow 6 and you can peel a piece off, basically a 1-pip yellow dice, put that in your pot, and then change the 6 to a 5, and now you have the 5 that you need for contract fulfillment. That kind of stuff, oh my gosh, those things are so cool. It makes you just feel so smart when you're able to pull off some of those things. And then you sit there thinking for your turn, and then once you fulfill whatever's on the bottom, you get whatever's on the left side. So for example, this tennis racket would provide 2 victory points. Well, not 2 victory points, but 2, I forgot what these points are called, but these points are what determine your multiplier. I'll talk about that in a second. You can get a lantern. Lanterns are used to, you can spend them to move a tile, like the action tiles that you move. You can spend a lantern to use a different tile and move a tile, but you can use the action off of a different one to gain a different bonus. I'm not sure if I got that one completely down packed, but I think I did. Then after that, you produce whatever's on that left side, and then it says you produce 4 blueberries. So you take 4 blueberries, put them in your pile, and yeah, so you just fulfill contracts, and then on your turn, as a free action, you're allowed to fulfill them. And what you would do after you fulfill them is you pay the price, you gain the rewards, and then you flip it over and save it for the end of the game. And once you get to the end of the game, you're going to count those up. Now, the way the scoring works is pretty interesting. So each contract that you fulfill isn't worth anything unless you move up on your reputation track. That's what this is. So because the whole point of this game is that you're kind of like working in the forest creating woodcraft, right? And so as you gain reputation, your little marker is going to move up this track. At the top, it's going to tell you how much each contract you fulfill is worth. So at the very beginning, if you only get up to here on the reputation track, if you don't focus on reputation at all, you can fulfill like 8 or 9 contracts. Let's say you fulfilled 9 contracts. You're only going to get 1 point per contract, so you're getting a total of 9 points at the end. But if you increase your reputation by 2, now each contract is worth 2, so now you got 9 times 2, so that's 18. That is a massive difference between 9 and 18 contracts. I don't know if you'll ever get to 9 contracts, but maybe you will. But as you fulfill these, if you can continue to move up the track, let's say you got to that 4, now you've got 4 times 9, which I believe is 36. And 36 points, that's a lot of points. But if you can manage to just increase it by 2, you'll get 5 times 9, which is 45 points. And that's an additional 45 points on top of everything you've gained throughout the game. Then you've got these public contracts that you can claim. The way you claim those is kind of weird because it can only happen with the contracts that you played at the very beginning of the game. At the very beginning of the game, they hand you certain contracts that have an almond on them, and those almond contracts, you get 2 of them, and these, when you fulfill them, the reward is that you can place one of your cubes and claim one of these public contracts. And when you do that, you're able to score that at the end. So for this one, for example, it's going to give you 3 points per pot that you have, and per glue, and the glue thing station over here in the corner. So that's a maximum of 12 points. This one lets you sell your resources for 2 points each to a maximum of 16. So if you have a ton of these little resources, you can get 16 points off that. That's fantastic. 16 points is a good amount of points. Here's the first player marker. It doesn't even matter in the game because whoever goes first just goes first for the whole entire game. Trying to think what else. Contract fulfillment. We explained the reputation system, how that works. Also, these contracts, you put them on this little track on the side of your board, and every income phase they move down. And so as they move down, they get close to the end where if you have not fulfilled an order by the time this moves down the track to the end, then you're going to lose 2 points for every contract that's down there. And so losing 2 points can be the difference between 45 points, go back 2, I lose 2, now I'm at a 4, now I'm getting much less, and every one of these is 2 apart. So every time you lose 2 points, your multiplier goes down. So you may go, if you had 2 contracts that you didn't fulfill, you went from a 5 multiplier to a 3. So now instead of 45 points, you're only getting 27 points, and that is a huge difference. So you have to keep that you have to fulfill your contracts. Don't place them if you can't fulfill them. And yeah, that's pretty much it when it comes to the contract fulfillment. You have these pots on the side that are pretty cool. So basically it's like buying lumber can get kind of expensive. The price for lumber, green lumber, which I think is more like ripe lumber, I think it's supposed to be represented by that green color, that it's like, fresh. That is costs 1 blueberry per pip on the dice. So if I wanted to buy this green 6, it would cost me 6 blueberries. But the yellow is worth a little extra, so if I wanted to buy that yellow dice, that's 1 pip, that's 1 blueberry, but I have to add 1 to it, which makes it 2 blueberries. And then if I wanted to buy the 5 has a value of 2, like a base value of 2, so you have to pay 5 plus 2, which is 7. So buying lumber can be pretty expensive. So what you can do instead is you can take lumber and plant it in these little plant pots, and then every turn that passes, every round that passes, it goes up by 2. And then by the time, after like 3-4 rounds, it'll go up to a 5 and then to a 6. Once it hits 6, it automatically goes into your lumber pile. It kind of automatically produces itself. Then from there, if you use the planting action, you could plant only a 1 or a 2 pip dice in there. But what you could do is you could shave off a piece of the 5, of the 6. You shave off a piece, put a 1 there, and then you can keep the 5 as a separate one. Or you could do take off 2 and then make it a 4. That's up to you. And I think that's pretty cool with the pots. There are tools you pick up. Throughout the game, you're going to get these tools, which are, they have like saws and different things like that, and you put them in your attic spaces, these little blue spaces. And once you start putting these spaces in your attic, when you have 2 tools next to each other that are different, you get whatever's in between them, and then you have to fulfill the bottom ones first before you can get to the top ones. Then you can start placing those orders. The tools are pretty cool. I didn't actually find them entirely useful. I didn't use them that much throughout the game, but some people might. So mechanically, I think this game is solid. I'm giving it 2 points for the mechanics of it. I think the mechanics are really, really good. I think I have to adjust this scale though, because I think there's some mechanics that, I think there's some things that outweigh, because a game can be really ugly, but if it's mechanically really good, it still plays really well. That's how I felt about Lords of Waterdeep. That game is ugly, but it just, mechanically, it's super solid. So that's a solid worker placement. So I feel like that maybe I can switch up my rating, but for now, I give it 2 for mechanics. And then finally, let's get into theme and fun factor. This game is fun. I really want to play this game again. I really enjoyed playing the game. It was a little bit frustrating at first, but once I wrapped my head around how the game worked, this is a solid game, man. And I just think that Vladimir Suchy did a really good job, and I'm really excited to see what he's going to be doing for the next game that comes out. Hopefully the next one's just as good or maybe even better. But I really like this game. Very good fun factor, and the theme is really cool. It's kind of like, you know, like a cute kind of theme, but you know, I felt like the theme was just fine, but it works out really, really well. And I think that all the mechanics really felt like woodworking. I remember, you know, my dad is a carpenter, and so I remember doing carpentry work with him, and some of the stuff of just like the ideas of putting glue together, putting wood together with glue, splicing wood apart, and putting pieces of wood onto other pieces of wood to increase the amount of wood that is in there. I just thought this game was super good. Has an amazing solo mode of trying to beat your score. My score was 105, which the book says 110 is a good score, so I almost got 110, but I missed it by just a little bit. The game is solid, man. I really like this. I think playing with 2 to 3 people would be good, but I don't know about 4. I feel like this game might take a long time with 4 people. I think the box says it's 80 to 120 minutes. That checks out about right. But when you add up all the points, I give this one a 2 for theme and fun factor. And so adding all the points together, we're sitting at an 8.5 out of 10 for me. So I like the game. It's an 8.5 out of 10. Has room to go up the more I play it possibly. But that's it for Woodcraft. Hope you guys enjoyed this review. Go ahead, like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll see you on the next video. Thank you guys for tuning in.